Hello everyone, my name is Paul Ranson. I'd like to welcome to a Smallnet Consulting introduction to Data Fabric. I'm joined today by Simon Fryett, the owner and the Managing Director of Smallnet, who is involved in data warehousing, data governance and data integration, all of which represents the layers of a data fabric. I plan to ask Simon a few questions, 2 to 3 questions around the subject, and hopefully this will give you an insight to what is a data fabric and why does it exist in today's market. So Simon, at a very high level, what is a data fabric in simple terms?
Thanks, Paul. Well, I guess a data fabric, well, first of all, it's not a product. Some people may think it is. You may have seen that around and about. It's basically an architectural concept, really, that is intended to give a cross-organizational kind of integration layer that provides single, consistent and managed access to all of your data sources and data across an enterprise, all through a kind of a single managed layer, if you like. So I think, you know, what we mean by consistent, I guess, is that we want the data fabric to offer up your data in a common form. So irrespective of whether it starts off as a piece of JSON or an XML file or a database table, it's about having it all come up as maybe as a set of pseudo kind of database tables that enable you then to bring that data together and possibly join it and do whatever it is you need to do with it. Okay. I think also the fabric needs to kind of control the access as well. So the idea is, what we mean by that is just making sure the right people can access the data that's relevant to them and only to them, is aware of data sensitivities and all those kind of things, but also is aware of data protection, you know, about making sure that you can't see maybe personal identifiable data or credit card details and all those kind of things that, you know, that might reside across data across your organization. So it's about giving that control as well. I think also it's also important to say that, you know, that the data fabric is a sort of kind of a supporting concept, and doesn't mean that with data fabric we no longer need ETL. In fact, ETL is part of it, and we no longer need data warehouses or data lakes. It's not a replacement for any of that. It's really about providing the kind of general access to your data in a safe and consistent way.
If I was a business, or if I were to adopt a data fabric, what are the sort of characteristics or the layers that one might see or should look out for? Just as an example, what are how is it made up and so on?
Okay, yeah. So the kind of architectural components of the data fabric, I guess, are basically about 3 layers. Okay, so the first layer is your kind of the integration piece of this. Okay, so the primary part of that, I think, really is data virtualization. So your data virtualization layer is the layer that enables you to reach through to other sources of data in real time and present them back to you in a common form. So it enables you to kind of to give access to data from all these various different types of sources, whether it's from from an application in the cloud that's giving back JSON data, whether it's from a traditional database on premise, or whether it's a weblog or whatever it is. The virtualization layer is designed to provide you the ability to connect through to this data at its source. Okay. In addition to that, the virtualization layer also needs to be able to provide things like access control, use controls, and also be able to do intelligent things like joining, like the joins you would normally get from a traditional database. It needs to optimize the way in which the data is accessed, so that it knows where possible it can do push down logic, for example. So it can maybe do joins and things at the source databases where they come from, and join them locally if that's more efficient at other times. So that virtualization layer is very, very important. But in supporting the virtualization layer, there's also the need for other traditional technologies like CDC and ETL as well. So your integration kind of fabric, if you like, has some traditional technologies in it, and also these newer technologies like data virtualization as well, to help bring the data to the fore for use. Okay. The next layer after that is the data catalog. So the data catalog is the important piece of this, because this is the view of the users to the data that they want to access. Okay, so most organizations these days if they don't already have one, are considering having a data catalog, and within the catalog we need to store 2 different types of data. So we need to store the obviously the technical metadata that describes the structure and the type of the data at the source location. Okay, but then it also needs to have like a business layer, a business context on top of that as well, that is used to provide kind of more kind of business information that enables you to understand and go and find that data. So if you're a technician and you understand what you understand tables and columns, you can use the technical metadata to go and find that. But if not, if you're more of a business user or a power user, then you can use the kind of the semantic layer that's provided by the business metadata to be able to go and find that information as well. Okay, but the catalog also needs to provide some other things in there as well. So it needs to provide some other capabilities, such as being able to redact sensitive data or to hide data, and to generally control who can see what, where, and when. Okay, and that usually should be kind of user and role based. In addition to that, finally as well, most catalogs these days, so we'll talk about having this information here, this capability here, is also about being able to profile your data and understand the contents of it. Okay, so this is part of the consistent and trust element of the data fabric. So you need to be able to really understand what the data looks like, how trustworthy is it used by others, are there many errors in it, all of those other kind of things as well. So we expect the catalog layer to take care of that for you. Okay. Expanding a little bit more on the data protection side of it, we've got the piece that says, well, I'm not going to let you access this because you're a user, and I won't show you that it exists, and I'll also won't necessarily let you access that. But there's also kind of more active data protection, and we're talking there about looking at how we manage things like GDPR, personal data, sensitive data that shouldn't be seen or accessed. So there's a layer really that takes care of that data protection for you, that should be enacted in real time. So if someone goes to access some data from a particular source, the setup and the properties that are created in your catalog will determine whether a piece of data is redacted or obscured or in some way changed to stop people accessing stuff that they should not really be using or is not right for them to use. Okay. And then finally, on the top of that, there's the kind of presentation layer really, which exposes these, the data to the actual users. And the idea again here is that we want to abstract people from the fact that it might be JSON or XML or whatever it is, and just have it look like a normal kind of relational database. So the presentation layer takes care not only of you being able to log in and your access rights, but also just presents that data, and that can be presented in a number of ways, either through maybe an ODBC connection, JDBC, or maybe through HTTP, REST interfaces, or whatever it is that the demands of your user group need to access data. Okay, I think finally the most important thing to understand is that all these layers need to be tightly integrated. Okay, so they need to be woven into each other. If they're not properly integrated, or if they come from lots of different kind of best of breed technologies, you can spend a lot of time trying to weave all this together. So it's important really to find, as part of your solution, to find a solution that kind of weaves together these core layers, so you're not spending time having to put that together yourself.
Okay, fine. So I guess the users could, just to recap on that, they could still use their good old tools such as Cognos, Tableau, Click, whatever BI, Power BI, whatever tool they want to overlay on top of this, so they don't have to kind of throw the baby out the bath, so to speak. They can carry on quite happily with all of those same tools if they adopt this fabric.
Yeah, yes, and very much that's the kind of the idea of it, right? Yeah, so it's about really protecting that investment in your existing tools. So instead of, just say Cognos, for example, connecting straight to your, to your data warehouse now, if you connect it through the data lake, you're able to then provide some extra layers of protection, but also it also enables you to be more flexible about maybe changing your mind about where the source of data will come from down the line. Okay, so the customer just sees, the end user or the Cognos reporting will just see, your data warehouse virtualized connection, but behind the scenes you can then, from a technology point of view, you should be able to then change where that's actually pointing to without the customer having to change their end product.
Interesting insight. I was just wondering, from having you been around the industry for a good 21 plus years, and sorry to age you that way, why that's important in today's environment, in the market and in the marketplace, just how you perceive this, because you've probably got some thoughts on that view.
Yeah, I think first of all, I think the time now is right for data fabric. It's become it's been a concept and an idea that's been around for a few years now, but it's gaining more kind of traction in recent years and getting more publicity. And I think, to understand why we want data fabrics or why we need it, it's probably a good idea to go back to kind of where I started 21 years ago, which was data warehousing. So 20 years ago, we had the problem where data was siloed. It was in your reporting was kind of done out of the operational systems that you had running in your organization, and often that data wasn't structured in a way that suited reporting. You also weren't able to be able to kind of to cross analyze across your applications, because each application had their own set of reporting, and also the data wasn't necessarily always trustworthy. It maybe had errors in it, or it wasn't consistent, or it wasn't able to be, things like codification stuff wasn't consistent across the various applications. So the idea of the data warehouse was to basically get rid of all these silos of information and bring everything into a single trusted source of data, and that worked well, right? And that revolutionized really reporting, I would say, for organizations, because we went from a situation where you couldn't really, you had to look at things on an individual basis, to being able to do cross-function reporting. You're able to point everyone to that same place, and so often we'd have something like a Cognos or a business objects tool then sitting on top of that as well, and these tools grew out of the data warehousing availability, and for a number of years they were enough, and people now had consistent, safe data. The silos were gone, and we had a central point of control. But what's happened is over time is that, due to a number of reasons, the data warehouse is no longer enough really to cover all the requirements of all the data requirements of a modern organization. I mean, the first thing is that the level of sophistication and breadth of what people want to do now from an analytics point of view has grown. Okay, so before we kind of generally had tabular reports and maybe a few little graphical reports that came out of things like Cognos and business objects, but now people want to be able to create dashboards. They came up, and also people want to do more interactive analytics, want to slice and dice data and interact with it with their hands, as in kind of real time. And these tools were aimed at kind of business users. So we started to get a proliferation of additional tools within an organization that were able to do these things like Tableau, for example, the kind of business users were buying for themselves, and were then started off by pointing them at the data warehouse, but then realized actually that not everything's in there that I want, and it takes long for me to get information into the data warehouse that I need. So they then started going to the data directly. Okay, so we started to kind of move away from this single point of the truth, and now we're starting to go. We started then to go back to this siloed kind of approach, and that's just increased. So there are now more and more kind of niche tools for niche reporting requirements that are out there. If you add to that as well the kind of the increased sophistication and requirements of analytics, we now have sort of model-based reporting. We have data science and all those kind of technologies and all those kind of disciplines as well. Again, they're introducing a whole lot of new tools as well that are all kind of wanting to grab data, okay, and use it. And generally they're bypassing the data warehouse now, because either for agility or because that information doesn't exist there. So the other thing is that the breadth of information has changed as well. So whereas before we had these kind of siloed applications, we're able to get data mainly out their databases. Now we have data kind of residing everywhere. We have web logs. We have data that's in applications that are based in the cloud as a service. We have data that are kind of based on traditional systems still as well, on traditional databases, and we have other kind of all sorts of other systems that are kind of now all interoperating together. And also with the maturity of digital transformation within organizations in general, most of these applications now are also sharing information between themselves and interoperating. So what that's done is it's also broadened dramatically the information that's required by a business to be able to run their business, from moving from just being kind of traditional relational database data to now to all these different ones that I've just mentioned. So we need to be able to handle those, and they can't all go or shouldn't necessarily all sit in the data warehouse. And then aligned to that also is the demand for kind of real-time data. Okay, so again, when the warehouse first came out, we were able to get away with loading a warehouse on a nightly basis, and that was kind of, that was enough to be able to run your business. But with modern applications and the modern drivers in business, it's now perfectly possible for businesses to actually to enact on data in real time and make changes in real time. And so there's a genuine demand for real time data as well. Okay, so these changes in business, these changes in people's appetite for data and their approaches to data, and wanting to have more and more self-service, has ended up with us going back to where we were when we started with the data warehouse, which was silos of information all kind of throughout the organization that are introducing the same problems that we had before. There's lots of, there's a big management overhead trying to manage all these connections, all these different systems. There's this inconsistency of data as people go and get their data from their own places, and there's kind of a lack of control as well. And that's a risk, right? Because by letting people go and access this data themselves, we can't control where they go, how much data they download, and whether they're accessing sensitive data and all these other kind of things. Okay, so the answer to that, the modern answer to that, is basically is a data fabric. And the data fabric is designed to basically kind of to address all those different issues, and provide a modern kind of platform for you to do all the different things you want to do, but do it in a controlled and protected way, as we wanted to do when we created the data warehouse. So what that also means is that the data fabric isn't the end of the data warehouse or the data lake or those other things. It's just providing a mechanism for them to be surfaced, but also for these other sources of data to be surfaced that naturally don't necessarily sit in the data warehouse initially. Okay, so I think that's why we need a data. That's why we need the data fabric now, because the world has changed and the demands on data management have followed that.
How would people go about, or how would you envisage people going about implementing a data fabric?
Thanks, Paul. Well, I think the first thing is that whilst data fabric to many people may be a kind of a new sort of phrase and concept, to us it isn't. So we've been helping people build integration layers for the last 20 years using various tools, ETL tools, etc. And we've kind of continued to do so. And in fact, we've worked on some of the early kind of, in quotes, data fabric implementations that are out there, and IBM has some references we've actually worked on. So we've got a lot of experience in helping people combine both their both their integration layer and their kind of the data catalogs to provide what is essentially the kind of the data fabric architecture. So we can help people do that. We've already got experience in that space, despite the kind of the apparent newness of the concept. As I said, for us it's not. So yeah, if you're interested in in implementation, then please just get in touch with us and we can talk to you about what we've done with other people. And I think also we'll probably do a similar sort of another blog and maybe a similar Q&A on implementation as a separate activity. I think that probably make sense at some time in the future too.
I couldn't agree more, Simon. I've seen a lot of that in my times. So we're going to wrap up now. There's more to come, future interviews like this and other things. So thanks, Simon. Interesting times we live in from an IT and a digital perspective. Some of the similar themes and challenges we saw from, say, 15, 20 years or more ago, just different degrees and data types and the explosion of all that. So, folks, if you would like to talk to Simon or myself, simply visit the Smallnet website and we'd be happy to arrange a no obligation call to update you on what we're seeing in the market. We've been around, you can see from our grey hair, for a little while and know a lot of these products and capabilities, and particularly around the data fabric. And additionally, there are lots of blogs and collateral that there on our website you can download and review. So without further ado, I'd like to say thanks, Simon, again, and we look forward to doing more interviews and blogs to follow. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Paul.